Senator Fierravanti-Wells.
President, tonight I'd like to focus on the impact of COVID in south-western Sydney. It was interesting to read today's front page of the Sydney Morning Herald about heavier lockdown measures being imposed in western and south-western Sydney. As patron senator for McMahon, Werriwa, Fowler, Blaxland and Watson, and with a satellite office located in Fairfield, I would like to share matters which I experienced firsthand which have enabled this perception to gain momentum. In mid-July, requirements were imposed on essential workers in the Fairfield LGA for COVID testing every 3 days. This raised concerns and perceptions about why south-western Sydney was being singled out. At first, there were logistical problems with testing at Fairfield Showground immediately after the New South Wales health order was made, which compounded the problems. Residents felt that they were especially being targeted given the strong police presence on the streets. Now, I live on the northern beaches of Sydney. I went through lockdown at Christmas, but I have to say we did not see on the streets of the northern beaches police cars lined up on Barrenjoey Road or police on the streets like we saw in the suburbs of south-western Sydney. Instead of imposing extra surveillance, there should have been greater focus on multilingual services and closer consultation with community leaders. To this end, in July, I posted a Facebook video message which had been translated into different languages. It was promulgated in the area, encouraging communities to get vaccinated. Also, my office started conducting direct calling into households. The feedback was clear. People were not happy about the delay in the vaccine rollout. They wanted the Pfizer vaccine. Those in small business and construction could not work from home. There were issues about homeschooling and the push to vaccinate their children. Livelihoods were being impacted, and people blamed politicians and bureaucrats making decisions who continued to draw big salaries. All this against a background of cultural and linguistic diversity and changing messages about restrictions. Another issue which caused concern was the deployment of the Australian Defence Force personnel. Local councillors and community leaders were very critical of government, calling it insensitive. As one mayor stated, deploying the ADF to an area with a large number of migrant residents from war-torn countries was insensitive. I spoke to one major service provider who pointed out to me that with such a large cohort of people born overseas, many of whom had been granted protection under our humanitarian program, they had escaped hardship, including from war-torn countries where they were fearful of the army. An article in the Sydney Morning Herald of 20 August outlined how community leaders in the affected areas feared for people's mental health, women at risk and disaffected youth, as they warned that the imposition of a police curfew imposed unevenly and without social support would further entrench us and them attitudes and inequality across the city. Regrettably, instead of focusing on maximising vaccinations through walk-in hubs at mosques, churches, community halls, where called communities regularly congregate, we heard stories of delays in getting vaccination appointments. I might add that I advised the New South Wales government that that's the strategy, but regrettably I received no reply. In the words of one community leader, if you want to do the curfew, regardless of whether it's legitimate or not, do it across the board. This message resonated greatly. Community leaders reported hardships by small business and families, being desperate because they could no longer afford to pay their mortgage, rent, bills or put food on the table to feed their children. The perception of different rules for different parts of Sydney compounded the sense of inequity. An op-ed by Jordan Baker, SMH education editor, who lived in an LGA of concern, stated that it wouldn't feel so oppressive if Sydney was all in this together. But here there is no longer any pretence of that. As Dr Martin Kuldorf's tweeted on the 14th of August, there is, as always, an enormous gap between the people who use elite media and political platforms to demand lockdowns and the people and families who actually bear the burden of those lockdowns. That's what makes lockdown advocacy for elites so cheap and easy.